Alright guys, welcome to the podcast. We've got a kind of a different episode for you guys today. Yes, my AC is on, my fan is on. I'm not turning it off. It's 95 degrees outside today, so there's no way I'm turning it off and getting this studio hotter than hell. Shout out Kiss. So it's going to be on. So if you guys can't ignore the background noise, hey, click off of it. But I don't think you should, because we got a cool episode for you guys today. I wasn't feeling well the past week. I had a lot of things going on, and then I'd gotten sick, so I didn't do any type of podcast interviews. And the 2 or 3 that I have, they are promoting something, so they have to be put out a couple of weeks later. So that's where we're at. But I want to talk about a lot of things that you guys like for me to talk about, and that's movies. I am actually starting a movie podcast, a movie review podcast, because I do come on here and I give movie reviews. And with these movie reviews, they're only 3 to 5 minutes long. And with the movie review podcast, I am able to give a full, more in-depth version of the movie review. So the one I did was Jurassic World Dominion, and I think it was almost 20 minutes long. Or it was 20 minutes long. So that's kind of cool for you movie lovers of the podcast. There's one episode out. I have not promoted it or anything like that yet, because I was just I'm testing it. I'm seeing how well it's doing, because if it doesn't do too hot, then, I don't know. And of course, yes, I know you can't do anything without promoting it. But it's on the production company's place it's on when you look at the podcast. So it shows up, and I just want to see how many people will gravitate towards it without me. I'm doing a bunch of tests, okay? But today, on the show, I went and saw Thursday night. I got a special presentation. They reached out to me. They were like, hey, man, come watch the movie. I know you're super excited. We'll get you in for free. We'll get you to a special screening. And that was ELVIS. I was able to see ELVIS early, a couple days early before everybody. And to me, that was one of the greatest honors I could ever have, because Elvis means so much to me in my life. When I was 5 or 6 years old, and I was watching my grandma listen and dance to music in her house, and she would pop in a CD, or she would pop in like a cassette tape or something, and she'd be jamming out. I never knew who this guy was talking about hound dogs, or dancing in a jail, or I never knew of any of that. And then I remember the first time I watched Full House, there was an episode where Jesse dresses up and is like an Elvis impersonator for like a casino or something, and that's how I kind of knew who Elvis Presley was. And ever since then, I just had this fascination with this character, with this, I don't want to say character, maybe a caricature, maybe, of this man, because he was a lot different in the personal life than he was in the spotlight, So anyways, that was my fascination with Elvis. It's just from an early age. And, I've read every book that I can think about reading that I can get my hands on. I've done so much research. I've even delved into the conspiracy theories, which I don't believe in any of the conspiracy theories, or of any type of theories. I just love listening to them and hearing how crazy things can get, and make you think, oh, maybe, but then you just, you come back down off the ground, you get back onto gravity. So, but I was able to see ELVIS, and this podcast, I want to take the time and kind of show you guys kind of how the movie review podcast is going to go. So I'm going to put this up on the podcast, on the movie review podcast, and I'm probably going to promote it, put it out there a little later this week. So here we go. Going into this movie, I didn't really have any type of hypeness. This was literally one of the biggest movies of my lifetime that I have, you know, was literally could not wait for this movie to come out. Like, before I was reached out, before, you know, they let me come to a show, I bought a ticket the week they went on sale. I was so pumped for this movie. But then, you know, the premiere happens and all these people come out and they're like, hey, this movie is actually this, and this. You know, it's not that good. They're getting bad reviews. It's getting hated on. And so I could not let myself read that and get into this trance of, oh, this movie is going to be bad. People have already, you know, paintballed my mind into thinking this. So I went into it blind. I said, you know what? The trailers all look god dang amazing. All the trailers that they released looked amazing. And so, but you do have to go in there thinking you're seeing a biopic. You're seeing somebody's true story brought to life in a movie. So you know there's going to be some kind of tomfoolery that they're going to try to pull on you. But I will say this. I wish they would have... Okay, let me say this before I say that. The movie is based upon Elvis, right? It shows him as a child. It shows him getting into the business, his career, and eventually, you know, passing away. But it's not your ordinary... It's not your ordinary biopic of... You could take Ray or you could take Walk the Line. I think those two do it like very, very great. Take those two for examples. That's not what Baz Luhrmann is doing here. What he's doing here is placing the life of Elvis. And so the main story of the Elvis movie is his relationship with his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. That's the whole... I mean, so when you hear people say this, and I will say this, and I will agree to a certain extent, but I will also debunk my agreeing here with a disagree, because people were complaining because the movie was happening fast. Boom, 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 it was happening. I mean, I'll be honest, it was happening very quickly. It was like 1 minute he starts... He 1 minute Colonel Tom Parker figures out who he is. The next minute he's managing. The next minute he quits Sun Records and goes to RCA. And then the next minute he's buying a house buying Graceland. It happens really like all within the first 25-30 minutes. It's happening that quick. But once you figure out exactly what Baz Luhrmann is trying to do, and what story he's going to... Once you figure out that the story is not going to be based upon Elvis's life and struggles, it's going to be based upon his relationship with his narcissistic and mind-controlling manager. You realize that around the 30-40 minute mark of, okay, this is what we're focused on. I understand why it's going fast, because they're trying to get to the point of the movie. Let's get it. We got it. Let's go. And I think that was the best way for Buzz to go, because you could do anybody's story, celebrity, anybody that has a biopic, Elton John, Bohemian Rhapsody, Freddie Mercury, Queen. You could take their whole story and you could make like a 6-7 part, maybe even a 10-part docuseries, like on Netflix or something. But I think Elvis's is a bigger story, and so you would need a 12, a 14, a 16-part docuseries to cover the entire life of Elvis Presley, because this guy was such an interesting man. And a lot of people don't realize that. And I realized this. A lot of people did not realize the true story of Elvis Presley. people realize that he was a singer. But a lot of people that I've noticed that are reviewing movies and, reviewing the movie, and even my own experience in the theater, was these people did not realize that he was controlled by this manager, by this man that took 50% of manager fees when its legalities is 10%, sometimes 15%, depending on who the artist is and who the manager is. And I think that's a crazy thing, and that's why it needed to be shown that way. Because if you had a regular biopic, right? Let's just take a regular Elvis biopic, and I don't know, you do the whole thing beginning to end, and you just throw Colonel Tom Parker in there, says he was a prick, says he was this, but then that could just be, oh, well, he wasn't really like that, he was just done like that for the movie. But once you do it this way and you realize that Elvis Presley was controlled his entire life, like from the minute he started at Sun Records, because now, and I will say that, and that reminded me when I said from the time he started, performing, that's kind of not true. The movie portrays it that way, but Elvis had a couple of big radio hits before Colonel Tom Parker got involved. And so he was at Sun Records for a few years before he left them and went to RCA Records. And the movie doesn't really portray that, and that's what I want to focus on just for a second. I'll get back to the point that I was trying to make. It's about, okay, you got 2.5 hours to tell a 42, however old it was, 42, a 42-year life. I don't think I could sum my life up, my short 24 years. I haven't lived the amount of life that Elvis has lived, or anybody. But I don't think I could sum my whole life up in 2.5 hours. Because there's a lot of things that you want to cover. There's a lot of things that should be covered. And so a lot of people don't realize when that happens, a lot of things, it has to be fast-paced, because obviously you realize that not everybody has, now it happens, but not everybody has overnight success. It's not 1 minute you're singing and the next minute you get found on YouTube and you're the next big thing. I mean, that happened for Justin Bieber, and then, Ed Sheeran was on there as well. But it doesn't happen for everybody. And so when you're watching these and this, oh, we sang in a bar, and the next thing you know, oh, we get a record deal. I am never bothered by those things. Never bothered by those things, because I realize that I'm not reading a book. I realize I'm not watching a documentary. I'm not watching a mini-series. I'm watching a 2.5-hour movie. I'm pretty smart to realize that it's not overnight success with 99.8% of these musicians, right? So I never have a problem with it being fast-paced, where they leave some things out. Now, and here's another point that I think we have to make before we continue on. The historical inaccuracies on Elvis. Are there some? Absolutely. I sometimes have problems with them. I had problems with like Bohemian Rhapsody, being that they got one of the biggest like historical things that happen in music totally wrong. I overlooked it because it was a movie. But with Elvis here, I felt that things that were historically inaccurate, they kind of narrated you with Colonel Tom Parker's narration of the film. I feel that they kind of corrected themselves. They did a double negative. Like, one day Colonel Tom Parker will be doing this, and then it's like, no, that happened 3 weeks ago, and then they'll kind of, for some weird reason, they'll like correct themselves in the narration, which I found was really strange. There's one scene in the movie which people were, this is the one scene that people were bashing this movie about. And it's the scene where Colonel Tom Parker takes Elvis Presley onto the Ferris wheel. And they're riding the Ferris wheel. He met him at a circus, met him at the fair. Obviously, that's not what happened, right? If you don't know that, now you do. That's not how it happened. Colonel Tom Parker was a manager for for Hank Snow, country musician. And Elvis Presley had opened up for Hank Snow, and Hank Snow had introduced Parker and Presley to each other, so they knew of each other. Here's what I want to say about this, though, and this is where I don't think people, when they watch the movie, they're not like me. I think about it for a long time, and I realize kind of what they were trying to portray in this movie. And so, when they're on this Ferris wheel, and it's in the trailer, so I'm not really giving anything away, but they're in the Ferris wheel, and they're going round and round. They're like, Parker's like, do you want to be a success? Presley's like, of course I do. He's like, I can make you millions. You can buy cars. I can get you in Hollywood. You can be the biggest musician on the planet if you just let me manage you. And after watching the movie and knowing the story of Elvis and knowing the story of Colonel Tom Parker and their relationship, you put together that, and here is what I'm going to say. This is kind of a situation where Elvis Presley sells his soul to the devil. Like, this is, for me, what they're kind of portraying. And I liked it this way because it's so much in depth. And it's brilliantly and excellently executed. Like, they did it so perfect. And if they wouldn't have done it perfect or done it this way, then I feel that the movie, because the movie was beautiful. Not the story. The look of the movie was amazing. You have Buzz Luhrmann's, the movie went projected into a comic book at one point. There was, it's like these pop out the screen 3D words that says 1943 or whatever. It's amazing. It's crazy. And I wish people could see this movie that have not seen it and won't see it, and they could just, because this is a depressing story. We knew, and I think there's probably a couple of other movies, but biopics in general for, musicians that passed away, the ending of the movie. You knew how the movie and the story is going to end. And the movie is a very depressing, a very sad story, but I feel strongly about my decision of saying that people need to see this. This, to me, is easily, so far, my favorite movie of the year. Possibly my favorite movie of the past decade. And I could be a little biased because I love Elvis Presley, but if this movie would have been as terrible as some of the TV movies that they did, like even the Elvis and Me, the movie based upon Priscilla's book, that's not a great movie at all. It's kind of bad. And they did a Kurt Russell version of Elvis. They did like these crappy knockoffs, like they did Elvis and Nixon, where the guy from 8 Mile, I can't blank it, Michael Shannon played Elvis Presley. They did Elvis Lives, where they took the conspiracy theory that Elvis faked his death. That was a cool concept. But it's a TV movie. They're never good. And so, once I realized this movie was getting an actual theatrical release, was getting the, $100 million budget that it got like $85-90 million budget, and they took it and they gave us this when they could have gave us completely something else, completely something obnoxious and snarl and just terrible. But they gave us this, and it's a long movie. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes. But I as an Elvis fan and a movie fan, I wanted more. I wanted more. The scenes that they created in this movie, oh my God. They recreated some of the best experiences in Elvis's life. They recreated the 1968 comeback special. That is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I mean, it was amazing how they got it, because they got the story somewhat right. They changed a few things here and there, but they got the story right. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but they got the story at least 80% correct. They recreate these movie scenes. I think it's Girls, Girls, Girls that they recreate. It's either that, Blue Hawaii. It's one of those ones where he's in Hawaii, and they recreate it with Austin Butler, and it's one of the greatest scenes in the movie. And I mentioned Austin Butler, and I want to say this: I'm not too sure who this Austin Butler guy is. People said he's in Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, but I don't think he was part of that when I kind of grew out of it 8, 9, 10 years old. That's when I started watching wrestling religiously. Austin Butler was Elvis Presley. People hate on Tom Hanks' character. Tom Hanks was Colonel Tom Parker to me. I mean, they both embodied these human beings that they were portraying, right? And I will say this, I mentioned this a few times to a couple of my friends and then my family that wants to watch it as well, and I said, I'll tell you this, and this is not me saying this is not me agreeing with some other person, because I've seen somebody else say this. I am literally not saying this to say it. I'm saying this coming straight, literally straight from the truth. I did not think I was watching actors. I did not think I was watching Austin Butler portraying Elvis or Tom Hanks portraying Tom Parker. I thought I was watching a film with Elvis and Tom Parker portraying themselves. I was speechless watching this movie, because I was like, wow. They do side-by-sides a lot. Or they did it a couple times. Let's say a lot. They did it a couple times with Austin Butler and the real Elvis Presley. And man, they look so much similar. And it was great that Graceland and the Presley estate and Presley Enterprises and Priscilla and Lisa Marie and Riley Keough and all the people still alive in Elvis's life, Jerry Schilling, all those people approved this movie, and I think they approved it for the right reasons, because of the relationship that because they portrayed the relationship of the two. Someone that created Elvis and someone that also, I don't want to say killed Elvis, but someone that created a great guy and then obviously drug him through the mud a lot. And I think if it was another movie, if it was any other, any other storyline, any other movie that was made theatrically, then maybe they wouldn't have been as so approving. You know, I want to point this out. Um, Linda Thompson, who dated Elvis after the divorce with Priscilla, up until a year or two before the death, before he got with Ginger Alden. Neither Linda nor Ginger are in the movie, or even mentioned in the movie. And I seen Linda Thompson, like, hating on the movie and saying, "Don't go watch the movie because they didn't put me in it." I was someone that watched the movie and knows a lot about Elvis's life. I would say there was the way they did it, the way the story progressed and the way it went, there was no need to add the other two. There was no reason to add Linda or Ginger into the mix. Because it did not hit on... Here's what it hit on. It hit on Elvis's relationship with his mother Gladys. And how she was literally the love of his life. It hits on the relationship between Elvis and Priscilla. Even though Priscilla's not really in the movie a lot, she's in a little majority of it. She's not in what people would think. I want to say that. I'm not gonna spoil it, but I would say that she's not in it as much as people would think. But when she's in it, they focus on the relationship between Elvis and Priscilla. They focus on the relationship between the two, how much they loved each other, and then obviously the down rail when Elvis was on drugs and was committing adultery on the road and touring. They focused on that those two relationships, as well as the Colonel Tom Parker, which was the point of the movie. And the way they ended the movie and the way they paced it, there was no need to put Ginger or Linda Thompson in the movie. There was no... Now, if it would have been something and there would have just been giant gaps and they said, "Oh, Elvis lived singly," then yes. But I don't think the way that they did it, the way it's released, the way it was shot, the way it was written, that... Now, would it have been cool to see them or even be mentioned? Possibly. I can't say for sure because I did not see that version of the movie. But from what I saw that there was no need to add the two in it anywhere. If it would have been written differently or the storyline would have been different, maybe so. That's a possibility. But I can't say for sure because we could go, "I think," all day long. I don't know. I never saw that. I never saw that part. I didn't see that movie. So how would I know? But I will say this. I think there's a lot of great biopics out there. But I think Elvis will be one of the best biopics ever made. Not because it's Elvis. Not because it's Elvis. Not because he's one of my favorite artists of all time. But because of the story that they showed. Because here's the thing. Kiss, Aerosmith, AC/DC. I can name a lot of musicians and bands that were screwed over by managers, but that's never really touched upon in a biopic. It's always just brushed aside because those are the people that made them who they are today, and that's why we should appreciate them, even though they were pricks or they took money or they stole, they didn't pay their taxes. Everybody looks past that. This is the biopic movie. Even if you're not a fan of Elvis, I think you should watch this because this shows the dark side of the music industry. This shows the dark side of what really happens, what can happen, and what happens a lot. So yeah, I mean, I think this could be the greatest biopic to ever be made because of that reason. Because it does not just depict the life of Elvis Presley. It depicts the relationships that he had in his life. And I think that is the most genuine and the greatest part of the movie. I give this movie, and when I was reviewing it for myself, I reviewed it on TikTok at the Hodgepodge Podcast over there. I gave it 4.5 out of 5. I still give it a 4.5 out of 5. The historical inaccuracies, it didn't bother me because there were some, but there was actually not a lot. Like Walk the Line, there was, they just look like they just rewrote the entire Johnny Cash story and made it into theirs. The 8 Seconds one was terrible, Bohemian Rhapsody was pretty rough, but I think they did it pretty well with this Elvis one. And you could tell Boz, Tom, and Austin Butler had the same or even more amount of respect for Elvis, and they wanted to do a movie that a lot of people haven't seen, and they wanted to do Elvis justice, and they wanted him to look down from the heavens above and say, thank you for doing this. So 4.5 out of 5 for the new Elvis biopic. Even though I'm not a big fan, I'll say this. Let me get a little sip of water here. I will say this. I'm not a fan of the title Elvis. I wish they would have titled it something. Sure, plain and simple. Elvis. What could they title it? I don't know. I just thought they could be a little bit more creative with the title instead of just a simple, lazy Elvis. The posters have been okay, but I think the poster that they choose to put out there was just like a dark one with Elvis or Austin Butler as Elvis with a guitar and like gold around it. I did not like that poster. There's a poster where he is dancing and his head's turned to the side. I think that's a better poster than the one that they chose to actually promote, putting the poster for the theaters and stuff. But other than that, man, I really enjoyed this movie, and that's why I think all those points that I made is why I think Elvis could go down as one of the best biopic movies in history. It's my favorite of the year so far. I still want to see The Black Phone. Of course, Thor's coming out. Haven't seen Lightyear yet. There's a couple coming out at the end of the year. There's some on Netflix I want to check out. But so far, this movie for me beat out Top Gun Maverick. And I gave Top Gun Maverick a 4 out of 5. I may even give it a 4.5. But I think this is probably easily my favorite movie of the year so far. And probably my favorite movie in the past 5 or 10 years. So, thanks guys for listening in on this, and thanks for bearing with me on these long. These leaks have been so damn long for me. And obviously thanks for listening to this and listening to this different type of episode. Means a lot, and I can see how many people download and click if you guys like these type of things or not. And if not, then we'll just let this be the only one. But if so, then we may have to bring these back every so often. Check out my Instagram at I am Mr. Dylan Hodge and Twitter at I am Mr. Dylan Hodge for the official new podcast announcement. If you guys are listening to this and you've heard it here, no one else knows about the new podcast. So you guys are the first here if you're listening. Thanks to everyone again for clicking. Enjoy, and as always, like I said, frown less.